All right, so those of you who watched my Mid America recaps, there was a Nimzo game I played in that I got into a little bit of trouble in the opening, and the computer showed this really kind of cool idea that I had that was reasonable, where I could have sacrificed a piece for 2 pawns and got some pretty nice play. Well, I got a similar position in a training game that I played, and I went for it. And I didn't really calculate it too much. I just kind of was like, let's see what happens. And I wanted to share that game with you guys. So let's dive in, take a look here. So I had the white pieces. We started off getting into just the regular sort of Nimzo, and we played a sort of our happy line. When they castle, we always bring the bishop out against c5. I've been really enjoying this g3 system where we're fianchetto, and we try to keep things open. d6, and this is kind of some of the most annoying sort of lines where black does this kind of small center. They play c5. They want to try to introduce d5 so they can play e5, and they lock everything up. And I really don't feel that comfortable in these kinds of positions, especially because then like h6, g5 comes, the knight comes on e4, the bishop maybe gets in some trouble on g3, and I just don't feel that great. So anyway, we play rook c1. We're avoiding this doubling of our pawns, and then c5 comes, and he hits me with I hit him with e3, hit him with e3 like that's something. Anyway, and then knight bd7 gets played, and bishop d3, again, most natural development. And now we get this h6 and bishop h4 and b6. And here, again, probably because it's like a training game and I kind of just want to like play and like test out some ideas, I decided to avoid castling. And I played bishop to b1. Honestly, this is not that great. It's not horrible, but it's not that great. I mean, the problem is that it just walks into here with pressure on this pawn immediately. And I don't really want to play b3, destabilizing my knight. I know my knight's probably fine, but b3 is not a move I want to play. So I don't recommend playing this bishop to b1. But my idea was that if g5 comes, bishop to g3, and now queen e7 to defend this pawn, because I haven't castled yet, I have more flexibility on the king side, and I can immediately strike out with h4 and be happy that my king is kind of tucked away here in the center, and the center is probably going to remain more or less closed. We force g4. We can move the knight away. This comes, and we have ideas of trying to play f3, which we can do immediately. He can grab here, and this is not a big deal because e5 comes trying to break things open. Well, I can always just castle now. And this would be great because now the center is not closed. Black's king is far more exposed than ours is. And this is just an idea that I was kind of maybe going for, but I tried to force it. And when you try to force it, it's not so great. So he did have this option here. But if they play this g5 thing and you haven't castled yet, it does give you some more options. But anyway, he chose the sort of natural development, and now I'm like, okay, fine, I guess I'll castle. This didn't work. He takes. Of course, we take back with the rook. It's our whole point. And now he hits me with g5. And this is the point where I decided to go for this idea. Normally, bishop to g3 is played, and that's a totally fine move. But because we have this rook already on c3, we have this bishop already kind of lined up. This knight's in place, this bishop's in place, and our queen can swing out, and we can play e4. There's not really anything that they can do to stop us. We have this knight takes g5 idea, which sacrifices the knight for a couple pawns. So we're only really sacrificing a pawn, and we're exposing the black king totally, and we also get like quick play. We've totally changed the dynamics of position, and I think this is a nice tool to have in your repertoire. Takes, and now king to g7, which is already a big mistake. But it's not clear exactly what black is supposed to do. Their main ideas are kind of out the window. Apparently the best is to try to play queen to c7. That's not really an obvious move at all. To me, it doesn't, I mean, I guess maybe it makes sense. I don't really understand the idea of queen to c7. I suppose it's just to get out of this pin, which we're not actually threatening to take this yet. But he chose king g7, which seems natural. Try to put the rook across and go hide the king over is a pretty normal idea. But I went e4 immediately because I want to swing this rook over. And if I can, maybe I'll play e5 and get this bishop opened up again. He played e5, and in my thinking, I wanted to close the center down, and then I could go full force on this side. That's not really the way that we should be thinking about this, though, apparently. I also thought it was great that this bishop was going to get shut out because at some point, perhaps, this bishop and this knight can connect, and we might have a problem here. So I played d5, But if instead, just rook to g3, and say he continues as he did in the game and plays rook to g8, well, this is a huge problem because we can take, and after we capture here, the only thing to do if you want to regain your material is to capture here, but then this is just made on the board. And so not locking up the center and allowing some fluidity here where we maybe have some options to try to use this D file was a better option. But, you know, I was also sort of concerned that something like this might happen, but that's patently ridiculous. We can go here, say you take this, we're doing great, but now just check, and okay, fine, take the piece. This is awesome, but now check, and where are you going to go? Here, only move, and here. And again, we keep things open. We got our bishop open. I said if I could play e5, I wanted to, but this idea of sacrificing like 2 more pawns after I've already sacked a piece, so now I've just a full piece down, but clearly this is fantastic here, and I should have more strongly considered this idea. Instead, I played d5, and I still had an idea of how I was going to try to open some additional lines here. Rook to g8 came, and now f4. This was my idea, activating this rook. I wanted to attack down this f file, put more pressure on this penned knight. And if we can get this open, this knight will be forever frozen. And if we get enough pressure on the f file, then this knight is also frozen, even if it's not a pen because of our attack on f7. So he played king to f8, and I went ahead and dropped the bishop back because I wanted to capture here. Again, a bit of a mistake. This ends up costing me some time because when I drop the bishop back, it's still undefended, and I've opened up the g file. Better probably h4. And then if black tries to just get out of the pen, well, I can continue on this way. Say they capture here, trying to keep things in. I can go this, you take here, and I come across, and sir, you can try to defend this, but this is 1, 2, 3 attackers, only 2 defenders. We pick our piece back up, and we have massive compensation here. So h4, just a faster way of defending the pawn. If instead you try like rook g6, again, we can just capture here, and we haven't had to waste time because there's not actually a threat on the bishop. And you can never really take with this knight because I can just come here immediately, and you've got to take with the rook. And I guess this allows queen h5, and maybe I'm going to come into here, and some real issues coming. For example, I don't know, let's say you try to just get out of the way, like here. Well, this is no good. This is not acceptable. That's just mate on the board immediately. Lots of problems here with queen h5. Anyway, bishop h4 was chosen. Not exactly accurate. So he comes up, defends, and now I did exactly what I intended to do, which was, you know, I'm following a clear plan, which is one of the nice advantages of this is like my plan's pretty obvious. You know, some implementation details, but it's still a pretty obvious plan. King to e7, pretty big mistake. Because now this pin is absolute, and it's double pinned. You need 2 moves now to unpin it, because you got to move the king now, and you got to move the queen. And it's not really sure where you're going to move the king at all. I chose to capture. He can't really take back with the knight. You take back with the knight, and you have insufficient defenders here. So you got to take back with the pawn, which is great, because now this pawn is also a weakness, which turns out to be an issue later. And I played here, immediately going after it. So now if this knight moves, you're going to drop this pawn, and I'd have a 3rd pawn for the piece, which is more than enough. I played queen here, and again, this is another point of where I lost more time with bishop h4. This move comes with tempo because there's a check here. But if I had played this h4, this diagonal, or not diagonal, but the file would be blunted, and I wouldn't have to worry about this. But I wasn't that concerned because I wanted to play queen f3 anyway. And this was my point, was to come here. Instead of that, I actually have some other ideas. For example, queen to d2 here, instead of this rook to f5. And my point is that I'm really going to leverage this weak e5 pawn and try to put optimal pressure on that. And I can even let this guy go. So for example, queen g8, I just go queen c3. You take, I move out of the way, and you come back to defend because you sort of have to. And I can just play captures, and you need to take back with the rook. Because if you take back with the knight, you're losing defense here. But I can just grab, and now you have to, and then this is a big problem. The king's got to move somewhere. I'm going to pick this knight up, and I'm just up a few extra pawns. Your king is still totally exposed. This guy's probably going to make a queen. This would be going after this e5 pawn and not being so married to the f file, another way that I could have improved. But anyway, rook to f5, queen comes out, and queen to g7, and now bishop to c2, which at this point, I was kind of starting to feel like that I had slightly run out of steam. I wasn't sure how to continue the attack, and my main idea now was I was going to go bishop c2, I was going to go bishop a4, and I was going to capture this knight. And when this knight fell, f7 was probably going to fall, or f6 is going to fall. But he doesn't really have to allow that to happen. So, for example, I thought that after here, this was probably an obnoxious move because I really don't want to let this pawn fall. But I only see one good way to not let the pawn fall, and that's to play b3. But now my bishop's not getting out. So this would leave us in some sort of a standoff where black really can't do anything because this pressure is so powerful, but I don't have any way to increase it. I suppose I could try to just ignore it and allow this capture, but I wasn't sure how I felt about this kind of a situation. I mean, this doesn't look particularly, I don't know what's going on here. I suppose you still can't take with the king. You take with the king, and now all of a sudden I'm winning my material back. But if you can't, maybe this was the way to go, but you can go here. I got to play g3. This looks pretty reasonable. But again, I've lost one of my defenders. I'm only down an exchange now instead of a piece. Hard to evaluate. I didn't see this idea. But anyway, rook g8 was played, and again, I lose another tempo because I need to bring this pawn. Again, how many extra tempi would I had if I just played h4? So rook g8, and now I have to waste another tempi and get my king off the diagonal, and I really kind of expected him to just capture and to give up an exchange to relieve the pressure here. He didn't do that. He played rook h to h6, just adding yet another. But now bishop to h4 comes, and he plays knight to f8, trying to get out of the way. But then this just blunders immediately. I took here. He came out. I played rook to f5 back, but actually here's just a quick mate. There's nothing he can do. The point is that I'm just going to play some sort of discovery, and this is going to be a mate. The king is completely trapped, so he tries to run away here. Well, just rook e8 is mate immediately. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This wins also. I just trade. I win my material back. I'm actually up in exchange now, plus a bunch of pawns. I comes here, and I chase the pieces around a little bit because they're pretty awkward, and it seems like I'm probably going to win one. And eventually, I do. I continue moving my pieces forward, and now finally, he cannot save both pieces, and resignation was in place. Anyhow, I thought this was a really nice game, a really nice idea, and something that I hope that you guys can take away and use the same idea in your games. I think some of the key points were having, my rook already on the c file, being able to play e4, and just this time that you get in this attack on the center, and also down the f file. I think it's a really nice idea, and hope you guys get to try it out. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.